We're going to start this morning in the United States, where there's been a flurry of news surrounding the presidential race. The internal strife over President Joe Biden's candidacy continues, with another senior Democrat calling for him to stand aside. And there's been breaking news in the past hour. The president has tested positive for COVID-19. He's now departed the White House for his home state of Delaware to recover. Our North America correspondent Jade Macmillan is covering the Republican convention in Milwaukee, where Donald Trump's VP pick will speak in the coming hours. We'll go to her in a few minutes, but let's start with the Democrats and News Breakfast presenter Michael Rowland, who's live for us now in Washington. G'day, Michael. A lot to discuss in the US, but first of all, the president has COVID.
Yes, as you say, Casey, good morning. That news breaking in the last hour or so. The president was on a tour of a key swing state of Nevada. He did one event this morning. He wasn't feeling that well, tested for COVID and was found to have the virus. Now, we can bring up some statements from both the White House press secretary and the president's doctor. White House press secretary Karine Jean-Pierre says earlier today, following his first event in Las Vegas, President Biden tested positive for COVID-19. He is vaccinated and boosted and is experiencing mild symptoms. And this information from Joe Biden's doctor from that official statement. The doctor says the president presented this afternoon, our time, with upper respiratory systems to include a runny nose, a cough, with general malaise. So the president has mild symptoms. He has flown from Nevada, as you say, Casey, to his home in Delaware, where he will isolate, but the White House is assuring Americans he's okay and will continue to operate as president while in isolation. But yeah, just another twist, another turn in a campaign full of twists and turns over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, Michael, never a good time to get COVID, but especially not when you're fighting for your own political future. Those questions over Joe Biden's suitability as a candidate had died down for the past few days, but we've now got a quite prominent lawmaker saying it's time for him to step aside.
Yeah, there was a cessation in hostilities in the Democratic Party over Joe Biden's future as a result of the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. Completely understandably, but today that ceasefire ended when Adam Schiff, a prominent Democrat in the House of Representatives, he in fact led the impeachment case against Donald Trump when Donald Trump was president. Adam Schiff is a prominent face on US political chat shows here, so he by far is the most prominent Democrat to come out today, as he did, and call on Joe Biden to quit the presidential race. He said that while Joe Biden has been a consequential president, consequential vice president, consequential senator, Adam Schiff says America is at the crossroads, and quoting from his statement, he says, a second Trump presidency will undermine the very foundation of our democracy, and I have serious concerns about whether the president can defeat Donald Trump in November. Going on to say Joe Biden and his views would pass the torch and in doing so secure his legacy. Casey, the interesting thing about this is that Adam Schiff is a protege of former House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi is still a major power broker within the Democrats, and it's hard to see Adam Schiff not at least running the statement past Nancy Pelosi before going public with it. So a very intriguing move and confirmation that there are still very serious concerns in the upper echelons of the Democrats over whether Joe Biden should remain as that party's nominee.
Yeah, the links to Nancy Pelosi, very interesting, Michael. Nancy Pelosi has not made any statement like what we've just seen from Adam Schiff, but she has done television interviews. She's talked about, you know, when Joe Biden is ready to make the decision, you know, either way, whether he's standing or not. You know, he's been very adamant that he will be standing. And we understand there's been reporting that Nancy Pelosi has been working in the background on this issue. So I think the fact that Adam Schiff is so closely aligned with Nancy Pelosi, it doesn't seem to have gone unnoticed.
Oh, 100%. Nancy Pelosi, at best, can be said to have offered lukewarm support for Joe Biden when asked on multiple occasions over the last couple of weeks. She said in an interview at the height of this leadership drama last week, events are moving so quickly. I've got to pinch myself as to how quickly events have been moving. Last week, when calls for Joe Biden to quit were at their fever pitch, Joe Biden had already said, I'm staying in the race. But Nancy Pelosi went on TV the day after and said, well, it's up to the president to decide. So a lot of people were deciphering that as Nancy Pelosi not being 100% on board with Joe Biden staying on as the nominee. So watch this space.
And Joe Biden indeed has been asked directly about his own leadership. Before his COVID diagnosis, of course, he did an interview with BET. I understand it's yet to air in full, but there have been some clips released, and he was asked directly if anything would make him give up the candidacy.
Casey, this is all an attempt by the White House, this interview and a couple of he's done with the major TV networks here in the US, to demonstrate to voters that Joe Biden can speak away from the teleprompter, he can do unscripted interviews, he can get his point across to journalists asking questions. Well, the journalists at BET News asked Joe Biden directly, were there any circumstances at all in which he'd consider changing his mind about staying in the race? And this is how Joe Biden responded.
If there had some medical condition that emerged, if the doctors came to me and said, you got this problem, that problem. But I made a serious mistake in the whole debate. And look, when I originally ran, you may remember it, I said I was going to be a transitional candidate. And I thought that I'd be able to move from this, just pass it on to someone else. But I didn't anticipate things getting so divided. And quite frankly, I think the only thing age brings a little bit of wisdom. And I think I've demonstrated that I know how to get things done for the country, in spite of the fact that we couldn't get it done. But there's more to do, and I'm reluctant to walk away from that.
I mean, Michael, so many ways you could dissect those comments. Previously, the president had said, well, only God can convince him to step aside. Later, he said he'd consider it if his staff could prove to him he wouldn't be able to win. Now he seems to have opened the door to stepping down on medical advice. What do you make of all this?
Yes, it's very interesting. And tell you what, I've been here for a couple of weeks now and watching intently what's going on in the Democratic Party. It's hard not to see this coming to a head sometime soon. The Democratic Party is on track to nominate Joe Biden at their convention in Chicago next month. There are moves, though, within the establishment to bring forward a virtual roll call to perhaps nominate Joe Biden before then. But I certainly think Adam Schiff coming out could provide cover for more unsettled Democrats, and there are plenty of them, Casey, on Capitol Hill to come out and express their concerns about Joe Biden. Joe Biden, although he's insisting on staying, and yes, he left that door open for health reasons, but he is rock solid, he's not going anywhere. But if this trickle turns into a flow of congressional Democrats coming out and saying, well, Joe Biden, you've got to go to save not just the White House, but to save the Senate and to give us a chance of winning back the House of Representatives, I think things could move pretty quickly before the convention next month.
And finally, Michael, Joe Biden in that interview was also asked about his sort of previous comments about being a transition president, a transition to a new generation of Democratic leaders. And it seems like he's explicitly acknowledged now that, yes, he did initially intend to only serve one term as president, but along the way he's changed his mind. What do you make of that?
Yeah, a very interesting observation there, Casey, and that is how it's being read by people watching that interview. Joe Biden, and I covered the tail end of the 2020 election campaign here, repeatedly made speeches about, yes, elect me for two reasons. One, I'm the only Democratic candidate who could beat Donald Trump. Yes, he was. Yes, he did. And two, in speech after speech, I'm the transitional president. I'll be the bridge president. He never said it, but implicit in that was, OK, elect me, I'll beat Donald Trump, and sometime in my first term I'll hand over to Vice President Kamala Harris to give her some clear air, to allow herself to establish herself as president so she could take on Donald Trump in 2024. So he has acknowledged that implicitly in that answer, but many Democrats say he should have done that last year, 2 years ago, and it's getting to the point of no return as we are now only, 100 or so days plus from the election.
Michael Rowland, such a busy day as they've always been for you over there in Washington. Really thank you for your analysis. So a massive day on the Democratic side of US politics, but it's also a very big day on the Republican side. We're at day 3 of the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. Let's bring in our North America correspondent, Jade Macmillan, who is there. Hi, Jade. How are you going, and what can we expect to see in Milwaukee today?
Well, Well, the third day of the Republican National Convention has just kicked off, Casey. We're hearing from a few different members of Congress at the moment. Hopefully it's not too loud and you can hear me there. But we saw the former President Donald Trump himself on that stage a bit earlier before things got underway. He was doing a walkthrough, familiarising himself with the setup, with the podium, ahead of his big address to this convention tomorrow night local time. It really has all been building up to that moment when Donald Trump will formally accept his party's nomination. He did still have that bandage on his ear that we've seen over the past couple of days, a sign, of course, of having survived the assassination attempt at that campaign rally in Pennsylvania over the weekend. No word yet on whether Donald Trump might come down to the floor later on, as he has done on the first couple of days of the convention, to listen to the speakers. But in terms of who we can expect to hear from, they will include Donald Trump's son, Don Jr., also Peter Navarro, a former Trump administration official who only got out of jail today. He was sentenced to 4 months in prison for refusing to cooperate with the congressional inquiry into the January 6 attack on the US Capitol. He finished that sentence today and has headed straight to Milwaukee to address the crowd. But the main event tonight will be a speech from JD Vance, Donald Trump's newly announced running mate. It has only been a couple of days since he was announced, and this will be a really big moment for the senator from Ohio. He's relatively inexperienced on the national stage. He doesn't have a huge national profile, so he will be looking to use this to introduce himself in such a very public way to voters and to spell out, we expect, how he would approach this job of the vice presidency if Donald Trump is successful in November.
I joke with the president that, I'm very excited about this evening, and I don't plan to screw it up. But if I do, it's too late. He made the pick, right? It's official now. We're going to get out there and try to fire up the crowd tonight and make the case, a very easy case to make, but an important case to make, that we have got to re-elect President Donald J. Trump to the White House, right?
Meanwhile, Donald Trump is, of course, the star of the show, and the incident that happened over the weekend in Pennsylvania looms large in everyone's minds. What's the latest on that investigation into the assassination attempt of Donald Trump?
Well, look, we still don't have any official word from federal authorities on what might have motivated the 20-year-old gunman who targeted Donald Trump. There are a number of different investigations underway, and still, of course, so many questions for authorities to answer on how that man could have been in a position where he could fire his weapon at the former president, injuring him and killing one person in the crowd. The FBI was briefing members of Congress today, giving them an update on where those inquiries are up to, but they were taking place behind closed doors. And we know that people on Capitol Hill are launching their own investigations. We heard from the Republican House Speaker, Mike Johnson, today about a House inquiry that is going to get underway. He also says that he will call for the resignation of the Director of the Secret Service, and she has been subpoenaed, called to give evidence before congressional inquiries next week. So she will really be pushed, you would imagine, on how this could have happened. What were those failures that led to this assassination attempt on the former president?
And meanwhile, Jade, in a week that's been full of huge political news in the United States, there was big news in the courts as well. One of the criminal cases against Donald Trump was dismissed, but there's been an update there too.
Yeah, the special counsel, Jack Smith, who'd been leading that investigation into what became known as the classified documents case. This was the case in which Donald Trump was charged with mishandling classified information. That case was dismissed earlier this week by a Florida judge. That was a huge legal victory for Donald Trump. It was one of 4 cases that he was facing, and Jack Smith has today formally appealed against that decision. So that was not unexpected. We did think that Jack Smith would formally proceed down that path, and that means that this legal battle isn't over. But crucially for Donald Trump, the decision to dismiss that case means that it will not go to trial before November's election. If Donald Trump is re-elected, given that this is a federal prosecution, he could instruct the Justice Department to drop it. So an expected move there from Jack Smith, but a significant one nonetheless in what has been such a huge week, as you say.
All right, Jade Macmillan, our North America correspondent. Thanks for staying across all of the very, very many details. We'll leave it there.